In the heart of a bustling village surrounded by lush green hills and the melody of bird songs, lived Emeka and his wife, Nnenna. Their compound was lively, filled with the laughter of their two daughters, Chidinma and Amora, who danced through the courtyards with the innocence of childhood. Nnenna was a kind and gentle soul, admired by the village women for her wisdom and strength. Though their family seemed blessed, Emeka was troubled. The weight of cultural expectations bore down on him like a heavy yoke. His desire for a son, a male child to carry on his name and legacy, was a constant source of unease. His relatives, especially the older men of the clan, had begun to whisper about his incomplete family, fueling his dissatisfaction. Despite the love that surrounded him, Emeka began to dream of finding a woman who could give him a son. This longing overshadowed the joy that Nnenna and their daughters brought into his life, setting the stage for an unfortunate decision that would soon change everything. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Emeka called Nnenna into their sitting room. He wore a solemn expression that made Nnenna's heart sink. "There is something we must discuss," Emeka said, his voice heavy. He explained that he had met a woman named Edeora, who, in his eyes, could give him what he desperately wanted, a son. Nnenna's hands trembled as she listened, her heart breaking with each word. Before she could respond, Edeora stepped into the room. She was strikingly beautiful, with long hair that cascaded down her back and eyes that shone with pride. Emeka introduced her as the woman who would soon join their household. Nnenna's words seemed to crumble, but she remained silent, knowing that protest might only make things worse. With a confident smile, Edeora turned to Nnenna. "I hope you will take care of me," she said. "After all, I will be the one to give Emeka his son." Emeka added, "If Edeora gives me a son, I will make her my second wife and buy her a car even more beautiful than yours." Nnenna swallowed her sorrow, holding back tears, as her husband's dreams of a son overshadowed his respect for the woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. Edeora moved into Emeka's home, and life as Nnenna knew it changed completely. Edeora strutted around the compound like a queen, her every wish turned into a command. Emeka, blinded by his desire for a son, demanded that Nnenna serve Edeora. Nnenna found herself cooking Edeora's meals, cleaning her room, and attending to her whims, while her heart silently shattered. As weeks turned into months, Edeora announced she was pregnant. Emeka was overjoyed, proclaiming that his prayers had been answered. He showered Edeora with gifts and treated her like royalty, while Nnenna was relegated to the role of a maid in her own home. The villagers watched with sorrow, some shaking their heads in disapproval. The elders, known for their wise proverbs, murmured among themselves. "A man who forsakes the wife of his youth will soon learn the meaning of regret," one of them said, but Emeka paid no attention to their words. Despite the heartbreak, Nnenna remained strong. She continued to care for her daughters, Chidinma and Amora, ensuring they grew up with love and laughter, even if their home no longer felt like the safe haven it once was. The girls watched their mother, confused but inspired by her strength. One day, as Nnenna carried a pot of soup to the kitchen, Edeora called out, "Make sure it is spiced to my liking, or I won't eat it." Emeka stood nearby and did nothing to defend his wife. Nnenna simply nodded, hiding the hurt behind a mask of calm. Her mother, who had visited that morning, took her hands in hers and said, "My daughter, the palm tree stands tall through storms. You are that tree. Stay strong, for the storm will pass." As Edeora's pregnancy progressed, Emeka's excitement grew. He prepared a grand celebration in anticipation of the birth of his son. He even began to refer to the unborn child as my prince, dreaming of the day when he would hold a boy in his arms. Nnenna, however, spent her nights weeping silently, wondering how love could so easily be replaced by ambition. She prayed for strength and asked the spirits of her ancestors for guidance, hoping that one day, her husband would see the error of his ways. As the days rolled by, Adora's confidence grew, and she treated the household as her personal kingdom. She sat in the most comfortable chair in the living room, ordering Nnenna around like a servant. "Nnenna, I need fresh palm wine," Adora would call out, her voice echoing through the compound. "And make sure it is cold, or I will not drink it." Emeka, who was once a loving and attentive husband, had become a shadow of his former self. His obsession with the unborn child clouded his judgment, and he failed to notice the toll his decisions were taking on Nnenna. He praised Adora publicly, boasting about the prince she would bring into the world. Nnenna, though weary and hurt, carried out her duties with quiet dignity. Her daughters, Chidima and Amora, began to see the cracks in their mother's strong exterior, and they clung to her, trying to offer what comfort they could. But even their innocent smiles could not ease the ache in Nnenna. One evening, as the sun painted the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, a group of village elders gathered in Emeka's courtyard. These men, with their grey beards and eyes full of knowledge, had watched the situation unfold with heavy hearts. They knew Emeka had strayed from the path of wisdom and decided it was time to intervene. "Emeka," began Elder Okonkwo, his voice steady and wise, "a man who lets his desires lead him astray forgets the value of the blessings he already holds. Your daughters are jewels, and your wife, Nnenna, is the backbone of your home. Do not let your dreams blind you to this truth." Emeka bristled at the elder's words, but a flicker of doubt crossed his face. He had heard these sentiments before, but his pride would not let him admit his error. "Thank you for your concern, elders," he said, his tone dismissive. "But I know what I am doing." Adora's arrogance reached new heights as her pregnancy progressed. She demanded more of Nnenna, making her run errands and do chores that were clearly intended to humiliate her. "You are here to serve me," Adora would sneer. "After all, I am the one carrying Emeka's future." One rainy afternoon, Adora called out for Nnenna, insisting she fetch firewood despite the pouring rain. Nnenna, soaked to the bone, struggled to complete the task while Adora watched from the comfort of the kitchen. Emeka, instead of defending his wife, simply looked away, pretending not to see. That night, Nnenna wept quietly, her tears mixing with the sound of the storm outside. Her daughters huddled close, their small hands trying to wipe away the sadness from their mother's face. But even through her tears, Nnenna whispered prayers for her husband, hoping that one day he would see the damage he had caused. Despite her pain, Nnenna's heart remained steadfast. The women of the village, seeing her struggles, rallied around her. They visited her often, bringing food, laughter, and words of encouragement. They admired her resilience and whispered prayers of protection, knowing the weight she carried. One afternoon, Mama Nkechi, the village midwife, came to visit. She took Nnenna's hands in hers and said, "Child, the gods see all things. A heart like yours does not go unnoticed. Remember, even the strongest storms must pass." Nnenna clung to those words, finding a renewed sense of strength in the love and support of her community. She began to believe that, perhaps, one day, her suffering would not be in vain. As Adora's due date approached, Emeka's anticipation grew. He made grand preparations, even hiring drummers and dancers to celebrate the birth of his prince. He decorated the house with bright colors and told everyone in the village that his son would soon arrive. Nnenna watched quietly, her heart heavy. She had once dreamed of the day Emeka would celebrate their children with such enthusiasm, but those dreams had been shattered. Now, she could only hope that the birth would bring about some change, though she dared not hope too much. The day Edeora went into labor, the household was thrown into chaos. Emeka was a nervous wreck, pacing back and forth while Nnenna and Momankechi assisted Edeora. The air was thick with tension, and even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Edeora screamed in pain, clutching Nnenna's hand so hard that it left bruises. But Nnenna remained calm, doing everything she could to help. Momankechi walked skillfully, guiding Edeora through the labor with the wisdom of generations of midwives. As the hours dragged on, Emeka grew more anxious. His dreams of holding a son in his arms fueled his impatience, and he hovered near the door, praying for the outcome he had longed for. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the cries of a newborn filled the room. Emeka's heart raced, and he rushed inside, only to stop in his tracks. Momankechi held a beautiful, healthy baby in her arms, a baby girl. Emeka's face twisted with disappointment and rage. His dreams had been shattered, and the bitterness was almost too much to bear. He looked at Edeora, who lay exhausted and tearful, and his frustration erupted like a storm. "This is not what I wanted," he shouted. "You were supposed to give me a son." Edeora, who had suffered through the pain of childbirth, began to sob, her pride crumbling. But Emeka's anger was too fierce to show compassion. He stormed out of the room, leaving Edeora to weep in humiliation. Emeka's disappointment poisoned the household. He refused to look at the newborn baby girl, and Edeora, who had once been so confident, now felt the sting of rejection. She tried to soothe Emeka, but his heart had turned to stone. Meanwhile, Nnenna held the baby girl with a tenderness that Edeora had not expected. Despite everything, Nnenna could not find it in herself to hold a grudge. She rocked the infant in her arms, whispering soothing words and silently praying for peace to return to their home. Emeka's bitterness grew, and he began to take his frustration out on those around him. He snapped at Nnenna, ignored Edeora, and refused to acknowledge the baby. His once happy home had become a place of anger and sorrow. The villagers watched Emeka's behavior with growing concern. They had once respected him, but now they whispered about his foolishness and the damage he had caused. Emeka, however, was too consumed by his disappointment to care. Unable to bear Emeka's anger and rejection any longer, Edeora decided to leave. With tears streaming down her face, she packed her belongings and cradled her baby girl. "I thought I could give you what you wanted," she said to Emeka, her voice breaking. "But I see now that nothing I do will ever be enough." Emeka, still blinded by his pride, said nothing. He watched as Edeora left the compound, her sobs echoing into the distance. The reality of his actions began to dawn on him, but his heart was still too stubborn to admit his mistakes. As Edeora disappeared from sight, Emeka was left with the echoes of her pain and the realization of his own foolishness. The weight of regret began to press down on him, and he found himself thinking of Nnenna, the wife who had stood by him, even as he treated her with disrespect. He watched Nnenna, who continued to care for their daughters with grace and love, despite everything she had endured. A pang of guilt pierced his heart, but he was too proud to approach her, too ashamed to ask for forgiveness. Once again, the village elders visited Emeka. They spoke more firmly this time, reminding him of the value of family and the dangers of pride. "A man who refuses to see his blessings is destined to live in sorrow," Elder Okonkwo said. "You have hurt the ones who love you most, Emeka. Make amends before it is too late." Emeka's pride wavered, but he was not ready to fully admit his wrongdoing. The elders left him to ponder their words, hoping that their wisdom would finally take root in his heart. Nnenna continued to carry the household, her strength unyielding. She did not complain, nor did she harbor bitterness. Instead, she focused on her daughters, teaching them the values of love, resilience, and forgiveness. One day, as she prepared a meal for the family, Emeka approached her, his eyes full of an emotion she had not seen in a long time. He opened his mouth to speak but found himself at a loss for words. Nnenna met his gaze, her expression calm but weary. She said nothing, leaving Emeka to wrestle with the guilt that gnawed at his soul. Emeka wandered through the village, his mind a whirlwind of regret and shame. He passed by familiar faces, many of whom now looked at him with disappointment. The children who once greeted him with smiles now avoided his gaze, and even the village market seemed less welcoming. He sat beneath the great Iroko tree, where he had often sought guidance as a young man. Memories of happier times flooded his mind, times when he had laughed with Nnenna, holding their daughters close. The realization hit him with the force of a mighty river. He had lost sight of what truly mattered. Emeka returned home, his heart heavy but resolute. He found Nnenna in the garden, tending to the flowers she loved so much. Taking a deep breath, he approached her, his voice trembling with humility. "Nnenna," he began, his eyes filling with tears, "I have wronged you in ways I cannot even begin to measure. I let my pride destroy the happiness we built together. Can you ever forgive me?" Nnenna looked at him, her eyes softening with a mixture of pain and compassion. "Emeka," she said quietly, "forgiveness is a journey. I have carried this burden for a long time, but the love I have for our family has never wavered. I will need time, but I will try." Emeka fell to his knees, weeping for the first time in years. The walls he had built around his heart crumbled, and he realized that the strength of his wife and the love of his daughters were the true treasures he had been blind to. Emeka's heartfelt apology marked the beginning of a long and challenging journey toward healing. The days that followed were not easy. Nnenna, though forgiving by nature, carried scars that needed time to mend. Emeka made an effort to change his ways, becoming more involved with his daughters and helping Nnenna with household chores, actions that had once seemed beneath him. The village watched Emeka's transformation with cautious optimism. They saw him fetch water from the well, something he hadn't done in years, and help prepare meals under Nnenna's guidance. The sight of him carrying Amora on his shoulders and teaching Chidinma how to plant yams brought smiles to the faces of villagers who had almost given up on him. Nnenna noticed these changes, but she remained guarded. Though Emeka's actions spoke of sincerity, she knew that trust was fragile, like a clay pot that, once broken, could never be fully restored. Still, she found herself hoping that, perhaps, this time, the changes were real. Rumors began to spread that Edeora, the woman Emeka had cast aside, had returned to the village. She had been staying with her aging parents, trying to rebuild her life after the humiliation she suffered. The news reached Emeka, and guilt tightened around his heart. He knew he owed Edeora an apology, not just for his cruelty but for the shattered dreams he had left her to carry alone. One evening, with the weight of this unresolved chapter pressing on him, Emeka made his way to Adora's family home. He found her sitting on a wooden stool under a mango tree, her baby girl cradled in her arms. Edora looked up, and her eyes met his, filled with a pain that was still fresh. Emeka knelt before her, his voice trembling. "Edora, I cannot undo the hurt I caused you, but I am truly sorry. I let my pride and desperation for a son make me a cruel and foolish man. I failed you, and I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." Edora listened, her face a mixture of sadness and relief. Though she couldn't erase the past, she saw the sincerity in Emeka's eyes. "Your apology does not change the pain," she said softly, "but perhaps it can help us both heal. I wish for a better life for my daughter, and I hope you become the man you were meant to be." Emeka's journey of redemption continued as he worked tirelessly to repair the damage he had caused. He spent more time with Chidinma and Amora, teaching them traditional songs and taking them on walks to the river. The girls, who had once felt the brunt of his neglect, slowly began to warm up to their father. Nnenna watched these moments with guarded hope. The love she saw in Emeka's eyes when he looked at their daughters was genuine, and she began to feel the walls around her heart soften. Yet, the memories of her pain were still fresh, and she struggled with the balance between hope and fear. One afternoon, as the family sat under the shade of the old mango tree, Emeka asked Nnenna if she would join him for a walk. She hesitated but agreed, and together they walked along the path that led to the village market, just as they had done in the early days of their marriage. "I've missed this," Emeka said, his voice thick with emotion. "Walking beside you, sharing simple moments." Nnenna didn't respond, but the way her hand lingered in his gave him a glimmer of hope. The annual village festival was approaching, and preparations were in full swing. It was a time of celebration, with drumming, dancing, and feasting. For the first time in what felt like ages, Emeka found himself looking forward to the festivities, eager to show his renewed dedication to his family. Emeka and Nnenna worked side by side to prepare traditional dishes. The aroma of jollof rice, spicy goat stew, and roasted plantains filled the air, drawing villagers to their compound to sample the delicious food. Laughter and music filled the atmosphere, and even Nnenna found herself smiling more. On the day of the festival, Emeka stood with his family, watching his daughters dance with the other children. Nnenna's laughter rang out like a melody, and Emeka felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. It was a moment of joy, a brief reprieve from the struggles they had endured. Though things seemed to be improving, Emeka's resolve was soon tested. A distant relative came to visit, bringing with him tales of a neighboring village where men were celebrated for having many sons. The relative praised the importance of male heirs, sowing seeds of doubt in Emeka's mind. The temptation to return to old ways was strong, but Emeka fought against it. That night, he sat alone, contemplating the path he had chosen. He thought of Nnenna's unwavering support, of the love his daughters brought into his life, and of the emptiness he had felt when he had pursued his desire for a son at the expense of his family's happiness. In the quiet of the night, Emeka made a promise to himself: he would no longer let cultural expectations dictate his happiness. His daughters were enough, and his family's love was worth more than any societal approval. Nnenna continued to be the pillar of the family. Her strength and resilience had kept them together, and she found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. One evening, she gathered her daughters and told them stories of their ancestors, women who had overcome great challenges. Chidinma and Amora listened with wide eyes, their admiration for their mother growing with each word. They saw the sacrifices she had made and the strength she had shown, and they felt a newfound pride in being daughters of such a remarkable woman. Emeka watched from a distance, his heart swelling with respect for Nnenna. He realized that the greatest honor he could give her was to stand beside her, as a partner and an equal. The village elders paid another visit to Emeka's home, this time with smiles on their faces. They had witnessed his transformation and the efforts he had made to rebuild his family. Elder Okonkwo spoke with pride: "You have learned a hard lesson, Emeka, but you have emerged wiser. May you continue to honor your family and the blessings you have." Emeka bowed his head, humbled by their words. The visit marked a turning point, and he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The village's acceptance and the elders' blessing were signs that he was on the right path. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Emeka took Nnenna's hands in his. "I know I have asked for forgiveness before," he said, his voice full of emotion, "but I want you to know that I am committed to earning your trust every day. I love you, Nnenna, and I am grateful for the love you have shown me, even when I didn't deserve it." Nnenna's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of relief. "Emeka," she whispered, "love is a choice, and I have chosen to love and forgive you. Let us move forward, together." Their embrace was a symbol of a new beginning, a fresh chapter in their story. The wounds were not entirely healed, but the bond between them was stronger than ever, built on a foundation of forgiveness and shared strength. Emeka became a more present and loving father. He taught his daughters the traditions of their ancestors, showing them the beauty of their heritage. He encouraged them to dream big and to know that their worth was not defined by their gender but by the strength of their character. Chidinma and Amora flourished under their father's love, their laughter once again filling the compound. Nnenna watched with a heart full of gratitude, knowing that the love she had fought to protect had finally been restored. The village, too, saw the change in Emeka and embraced him once more. The whispers of disappointment were replaced with words of respect, and Emeka felt a deep sense of belonging. The journey had not been easy, but Emeka had learned the true meaning of family, love, and redemption. He had let go of his desire for a son and instead cherished the blessings he had been given. His daughters were his pride, and Nnenna was the heart of his home. One evening, as the family sat around the fire, Emeka told his daughters a story. Once, he began, there was a foolish man who almost lost everything because he couldn't see the beauty of what he already had. But he learned that love, when nurtured and respected, is the greatest treasure of all. Chidinma and Amora listened, their eyes shining with love for their father. Nnenna took Emeka's hand, and together, they watched the stars, knowing that their family, though tested by hardship, had come out stronger on the other side. And so, Emeka's journey to wisdom became a story of hope, love, and the power of redemption, a story that the village would tell for generations, a reminder that even the most lost among them could find their way back home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give us a like and don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more interesting stories. Your support is everything to our growing channel.